Just waiting on the players to reload in today. I'm hoping SpartanxElite hasn't disconnected on us. Oh, here we go. So the map's loaded in. Woodland Maze. So this is a map that doesn't get a lot of play, actually. I suppose because the water is quite messy, and I don't know if there's actually any food in it, and if the resource spawns are very even, because you've got all these medium gold deposits as well, so you're only getting 1600 gold between the pair of them compared to 3000 out of your main gold mine. But you've got your normal hunt, and you've got these spawns where they're all really close together with the stone mine as well every time, so it makes for a bit of an interesting matchup. I haven't seen too many games on it, but I don't think there's anything actually in the water here. Oh no, there is, sorry. There's actually quite a few fish here. So it's a lot like an inland on steroids. It'd be interesting to see it make a comeback, but I'm sure there's reasons as to why it's a shit map. Perhaps a little bit too much fish there, and the fact that some ponds you can actually hit others, I suppose. It's just that it's a map that's relatively unplayed. Like, I've almost never seen it in the map pool at all, or anyone play it, so this is actually my first time casting on it. I've never actually played a proper game on Woodland Maze, so it's interesting to see Happy pick it. I suppose this is also wise that things can spawn in the water, like this berry bush here, and you've got these big clumps of resources to fight over as well, so I might have actually cast one game on it maybe, but I can't quite remember. But this is a really interesting map because I'm so busy looking at how different it is to not notice what's going on. So HappySmurf going for a barracks. SpartanxElite already has his on the way. SpartanxElite's actually started on the berries here, while HappySmurf started on his hunt. So SpartanxElite not able to actually find... Oh yeah, so it might be hard to actually find a starting hunt as a player on this map. Perhaps that's why it's not picked that often, and the fact that, well, actually I suppose they're actually gatherable. They're right on the edge of the water. But still, a little bit too close to comfort. You can't really get a good surround on the berries. And there's just so many weird resource placements on this map. So perhaps that's why we don't see it. But I mean, with a bit of tidying it up, perhaps you could sort of play it like an inland on steroids. Some of these ponds I think have like 4 fish each. Some of them have like... it must be 4 is the standard amount then. Yeah, B4 is the standard amount maybe. Although this one might only have 3. Or perhaps it's completely random. I don't know. Beats me, man. Anyway. 14 villages to SpartanxElite, 13 to Happy at the moment. But HappySmurf has his 3 spearmen here to defend already. SpartanxElite sending his in one at a time, but there's this little wall here, which I like from HappySmurf, making this quite guarded, because he's already on this medium gold mine. He's actually got a starting gold up here, but he's opted to take this greedy gold mine and this stone, which is actually a medium stone mine as well. I didn't realize it's only a medium. HappySmurf cleaning up there, getting that initial spearman kill. Gonna take another here. It's interesting casting on maps like this. They're just so weird and different, so out of flavour with people. So might even do some games on it myself one day with some arena games just to fuck around with the boys and the girls. Just playing some of this weird... Like, what is this? Like, these are regular, so that's like 9,000 there, right? But then you get like... Crap all, you get like 1,600 here, and you get like 800 compared to, what's that, 2,000, so... I don't know, the resource spawns are just weird. And HappySmurf definitely has a bit of an advantage here with the unit count. But SpartanxElite has also taken a dock in the meantime, so if you can get the fishing boat out here in time, you can actually have a bit of range fire. Actually start getting that efficient gathering. But HappySmurf going to try and take down the dock and take the fight as well. It's going to be hard for him though, because he hasn't got any more spears in production or on the way here, which he really needs at this point, but he's getting them from now. He's cleaning up the units one at a time, but he's backing off, so not able to actually finish that fight there. He really could probably clean this all up though, because he can kill those relatively quick. And yeah, he's got the spearman advantage. But he's going to try and take a fairly greedy storehouse in a sense. He can get all these resources for free. If you can get the docks around this and defend it, it can make it very, very hard for his opponent to do anything. So SpartanxElite is probably going to have to do it down here. Right now, SpartanxElite taking the fight to HappySmurf, but he doesn't have the unit count here. Because HappySmurf has reinforcements right around the corner. 3 new spears during the fight and a 4th on the way. SpartanxElite bringing in 2 more spears, but it just won't be enough. HappySmurf all the way up to 8. To his opponents, 3 spears, and he's got a scout there. Really low health in the mix. The range one though, so I can get that little bit more damage in the fight. Actually gets lovely 3 damage or 2 damage out. 3 damage I think it is every hit. So 22 to 25. SpartanxElite with a small village elite here and getting his age 2 on the way. So that's really good for him. But HappySmurf also winning this little trade here. And does have a lot more resources in the bank. So if he spends up well here, he can actually put a lot of pressure right now out on the SpartanxElite, or in a couple of minutes or so I should say. So HappySmurf actually fishing. It's really interesting. Yeah, so instead of taking any eco tax, food tax and worrying about all that sort of thing, he's just going for the fishing, which is a nice 1 food per second, whereas the berries is only 0.9 to start with. And the huntable is 1.3, but he did get that hunt advantage over his opponent. So SpartanxElite hasn't actually found a hunt anywhere on the map, I don't think. So this hasn't been so kind of a map to him. But HappySmurf, oh, the bear. Bear chasing the villager all the way out of the woods. But the spearman's going to come in, escort him in, hold his hand through it. But with another little wall here, and another little wall here, HappySmurf only really has to worry about defending this little choke. So if he then gets on the water here and here, it can be very difficult for his opponent to come into his base at all. Whereas SpartanxElite is quite wide open at the moment. He's getting the second town center here, but he's got all this area quite exposed here, so there's a lot of little chokes for HappySmurf to run through into his base. And HappySmurf already making a start to gathering up here on that top side, and on the bottom side this big clump of resources is just hasn't really been sought after by the players at the moment. SpartanxElite has this in reserve still. HappySmurf is about halfway through the resources over here, but he still has a lot of his starting resources and this little clump here to go through. SpartanxElite taking one of these central berries. It's a very interesting map for resource spawns. You probably run out of stuff on the land quite quickly though. And you got to be careful with how many fishing boats you do get. You don't want to get any more than probably one more than the number of lakes, number of ponds, fish schools, sorry, per pond. And looks like SpartanxElite's actually on 1 over that when he probably could have looked at moving on to another lake too. Because these do run out eventually, and then you've got all these fishing ships just dead in the water population you've got to delete. So if you could have gathered it with less villages, less population space to begin with, that's always nice. So there is some Shoring Axeman now in the mix, and there is also some HappySmurf. There's now a range for HappySmurf as well, and SpartanxElite going for the stables, double stables actually, still only on single barracks. So double barracks for the Greek player, so this is going to be good for HappySmurf in a sense. He can get the spearman out he needs to deal with the raiders, and then you get that small number of Toxotes he needs just to ward off all the infantry of the Norse player and buy himself the time he needs to get really rolling in age 3. So Greeks tend to play around their age 3 in a lot of matchups, and in the others they tend to play around their age 2. They also reasonable late game, I suppose everyone does. But yeah, you are often sort of playing for a particular age in the matchup, whereas the age before you typically have to worry about strong aggression from the other civs. Meanwhile, the other civs, a lot of them tend to quite experience having to back off if they don't seize the opportunity early, or if they do go for a fairly greedy opening, having to play quite defensively for a little while after. And there's more infantry joining the mix right now. 35 villages to 46, so SpartanxElite actually quite a fair bit ahead. HappySmurf with a delayed town center. He's got the stone he's needed to get that up for a while, so he's going to really cop it economically for being behind by about 12 villages now. And because he doesn't have water, that's basically another 5 villages, so down by about 17 villages worth of economy right now is going to be really hurting for him. And this raiders coming out in the field in good numbers. So because there's the double stables production and there's now a range on the way. Now this is probably excessive unless you're going to take the age 3 quickly, and you want to have a really good economy to be taking the age 3 early. You probably want to just get another barracks or another stables, depending on what you think the enemy unit composition is going to be like in that position, because you're only going to be able to build skirmishers, and if you can build raiders instead and be a food gold economy primarily, the raiders are going to be far more mobile, going to have a little bit more health, well, far more health actually. So against non-counter units, you're going to have the time to actually be able to do things with them and be able to, you know, harass villages and your opponent's economy and infrastructure and stuff. So that's always one thing to take into consideration with going with things like the early range on the Norse, or with getting a high Sarasophroi count on Greek, or a higher one that you really need, because the Sarasophroi aren't going to really counter anything in this matchup. They're just going to be a good pest against the raiders, and help pull some attention away from the Toxotes who actually do get countered by the raiders, while the spears are also going to help counter the raiders, and then the Toxotes and the Hypaspis to deal with the throwing axemen. And likewise, throwing axemen can sort of deal with Toxotes in a sense that they're only soft countered by them compared to other anti-infantry like Hypaspis. The raiders can actually deal with the Toxotes straight up, and the throwing axemen can basically attack the Hypaspis from range, so they've got that advantage going for them. So it makes for a bit of an interesting fight, because the Greek does have a lot more power in their composition, but the Norse certainly has a lot more mobility, and the more raiders they get, the beefier of a front line they get, because then the Greek needs to get a lot of spearmen to deal with this. But Happy's already got 20. 52 to 71 is the village count, so SpartanxElite actually getting some upgrades. Getting barbed arrows, which is strange because he's only got a small amount of skirmishers. The rest of this army is all melee damage, so I'm not quite sure why he's gone oh, he's actually already taken it. Oh, okay. That's good for him. That's really good. Okay, so SpartanxElite already has all the upgrades he can get at this stage in the game, except for that one just finishing off. Although you might want to, if you haven't got as much breathing room as this, it's pretty much meta to actually skip it. Only take it in age 2 once you're actually getting the archers out. Maybe even start on an age 2 melee damage, or whichever armor upgrade you need more, upgrade first. This huge raider count will be plenty to deal with these Saris, so we're going to take a while to actually chip through this wall. But HappySmurf is on the ball here, able to micro them back. They are actually a slower unit though. And SpartanxElite already has the upgrade for his raiders, whereas HappySmurf doesn't have it for his Saris, so yeah, he's actually got a 1.5 movement speed disadvantage here compared to these raiders, so that's a huge number of raiders there from SpartanxElite. Be able to deal a lot of damage with those, and HappySmurf needs to get spearmen onto them, and maybe even look at pushing SpartanxElite's base. HappySmurf really probably should have just looked at pushing straight into the army, because if he can give the raiders room to just kill anything, then it's going to be tough for him to do anything, because the Saris are really only good while they've got the upgrade themselves when the Raiders don't, because then they're actually, I think, nearly as fast. They're like 0.5 slower. So they're actually, you can sort of micro them away from the Raiders and also just be a much quicker pest against the economy units of the Norseplayer. So, but when the Raiders, when there's this many out, you just need a huge number of spearmen, a small number of both Saris and Tox, and just push into the Norse before they get the opportunity to get on a huge number of bowmen themselves, and just have bowmen and Raiders. Or if you don't have the ranged bowmen throwing axemen and Raiders, and it can be a really rough age 3 for the Norse player for the Greek player as well. So perhaps Happy would have been better off pushing a bit earlier when there wasn't the Raiders out too. So right now, a nice position for our Norse player, SpartanxElite. He's able to really expand into the late game. He's going to be able to seize this, and he's even going to be able to seize this big pile of resources up here too. So HappySmurf is going to run out of resources much quicker than his opponent here. He's got all these small deposits, but they're going to be nothing compared to these two sets of 6,000, 9,000 gold and 2,000 stone each. So now that SpartanxElite has seized both of those and is faster on the lake, in fact, HappySmurf has no water yet. So SpartanxElite is really sucking more up out of this map. He's really feeding his army much better. And there's all these fairly offensive production facilities, which are nice to have really, because if your opponent's attacking them, he's not attacking your army, and you can pop units out straight in the fight. The only problem is it makes it a bit hard to maneuver your army, but at the same time, if your opponent just nosedives straight onto a building, then you just come in from the sides, get some extra shots off that he's got to respond to. But right now, there's a huge amount of cavalry here for SpartanxElite, but there's also a lot of spears, and there are Prodromos now in the mix, so HappySmurf does have that nice counter to the Raiders. Prodromos have got 11 speed, so they are going to be able to catch these Raiders. Once they get the horsemanship upgrade, they're going to be on even footing, and there's only horsemen here dealing with the Toxotes, so they're not falling as fast as SpartanxElite would like. There's Prodromos coming in the mix, but the horsemen are on the other side of the fight now. And they're throwing axemen. And the skirmishers are under a bit of threat from the Prodromos, but there's just not enough of them here, I don't think. SpartanxElite definitely has the economic advantage backing this up, and he's definitely able to produce a lot more behind this and just parade push into HappySmurf at the moment. So the stables looks to be falling. HappySmurf does have a fairly safe market line up in behind this, but SpartanxElite definitely has a lot more units left up at the moment. Working count 67 to 78, so HappySmurf has caught up a little bit in that regard, but still needs to close the gap and needs to get on the water or something at this point, because you know he's on third town center. I think he's behind in upgrades for his army, and he just has no army left at the moment, really. There's all these units running out one at a time, but GG. Alright guys, bit of a scores wrap up. So definitely a little bit bigger army there for SpartanxElite, but economically I think that's where he really shone. HappySmurf really falling behind by about 15 there, but closing the gap a little bit towards the end of the game. But it just wasn't enough. SpartanxElite having taken a little bit more in terms of his tax, in fact 23 to 10, so a little more than double the tax in the end. HappySmurf didn't really get much out. Where is his armory? So HappySmurf really only able to get out his melee damage upgrade, and then once all of his melee fell except the Prodromos, that was it. He was sort of, his army was basically naked, and then it was just, yeah, hard to come back from there. In fact, sort of the Prodromos left up while that first bunch of units died. Then once they fell, any units coming out here and not being rallied back here to a nice defensive position. We're just able to take a heap of fire, and SpartanxElite had probably a little bit more production facilities by that stage of this game. In fact, he's got a huge food economy here, although he probably could have looked at expanding to another one of these lakes. It's a bit of a weird map, this one, Woodlane Maze. The food allocation across these lakes seems to be a bit all over the place. Like, there's a few in these central ones, but not like this one here or these ones on the sides. Anyway, guys, GG. Thanks for watching. We'll bring you round number 4 tomorrow. And sorry about all the exhibition games, guys.